involved with Pathways to Peace and the International Day of Peace is a sweet story for me because I had retired from the Olympic Games. I had had an extraordinary experience in which I placed second at the Olympic trials without physical training and needed to explore how do ordinary people do extraordinary things. And I had put together this framework called Olympian thinking that says when people achieve things that they're not supposed to be able to do, they have three things. It's something they're passionate about, they think about it in very particular ways, and they've got a good game plan and daily practice. And I happened to be thinking about applying that framework to peace. I had asked myself, well, what am I passionate about? And my grandmother, human potential and peace, came to mind. And when peace came to mind, which was brand new, it's not something I had thought much about, I could see that we had two of those three things. That people want to live in peace, and most of them would be willing to do something if they knew what to do, but how they think about it is really not very effective. So as I was getting more and more excited about, well, how you think about something is just about information. So if people are well informed about something, they're able to act in alignment more easily than if they're poorly informed or misinformed. So I was in the midst of all of this and thinking, I don't know anybody that has to do with peace, and I was having all of these ideas that were getting me more excited, and the phone rang. And it was a representative from Pathways to Peace. This was 1983. I discovered the years that people had put into it and the ways in which people have been thinking about these issues, and I stepped into a fabulous community of very committed, very intelligent, highly energized people. So I met Avon in 1983 on Peace Day at the Civic Center Plaza, and I gave my first presentation, and I was part of this wonderful, wonderful event and celebration that Pathways put on to recognize the International Day of Peace. It's like wind came up beneath my wings. Mm-hmm. So here was a whole community and world full of people who were thinking about things that I had never thought about. So I embarked on a journey of, that had, years worth of just inspiration, and things like Avon Madison and Willis Harmon invited me to be part of this 5-year think tank on the role of business in peace building. So for 5 years, I met with people who, were deeply conscious about these issues, all kinds of issues related to peace and business. It's pretty clear that no matter who you talk to, if you talk about peace, what do you mean, what's inside the circle of peace? That most people have pretty much the same stuff inside the circle. And sometimes there are some differences, but for the most part, no matter where you come from, no matter how much money you have, no matter what your political persuasion is, when people dive down and talk about what they mean by peace, they're talking about the same thing. So for me, that just took me off into another spiral. It's like, we have a common vision. People have the same goal, and we have a common vision, so it's just about strategy. So what's the status relative to these issues? So that's really where I feel very excited about the International Day of Peace. Because as part of the charter for that day, thanks to Avon and the people who helped found very thoughtfully this day, one aspect of it is to give evidence of our progress toward peace, or the existence of peace, or the status of peace. When you say peace, most people kind of, they roll their eyes and don't exactly know what they mean by that, and they're not sure they really want to talk about it, but it's all very fuzzy, and it has a lot of baggage with it, and I thought, that's not the way Olympic athletes think about gold medals. If that's how people are thinking about peace, that it's fuzzy and just all of this poor and misinformation and beliefs and so forth, this is not an effective way. We have to shift our thinking. And one of the early groups I came in communication and contact with was the Brahma Kumaris, who are a world spiritual university, and the Visions of a Better World Foundation. And their mission was to ignite the spirit in all people, to conceive and make real their vision of a better world. So I thought, that's it. That's it. We want to inspire people to conceive and be really clear about what they mean, and to make it real. This is a family that I can be with. So I found lots of organizations that were doing extremely important work in all of these different pieces. And one of the things the Brahma Kumaris did that I think still has not yet taken its rightful place is they went around the world into 123 countries and asked people the question, what is your vision of a better world? So when I think about peace, I think about my experience in the Olympic Village. And the two things that were present for me were respect, number one, that have respect for myself as well as everyone else, and curiosity. So for me, I have this image of living in a global Olympic village where people walk around with just the basics: respect and curiosity. The Peace Wheel that Pathways to Peace created, that has come from work from many, many different organizations and lots of non-governmental organizations with the UN about how important governance is to the establishment and maintenance of peace, and how important education is, how important how the sciences are used, how we pay attention to the environment. So the Peace Wheel was one of those places where here's a way to think effectively about peace. And if each of these areas has a goal in terms of, well, what does good governance look like? What does universal education look like? We can measure ourselves relative to these things. And so I started over the years really finding out who's been talking about and measuring these things and creating projects to address these things. And I continue just to get more and more excited all the time, because people who are involved in those foundational elements, many of them are much more enthusiastic now than they were 20 years ago. So many of them are much more excited now about the real possibility and the importance of having stabilized the population, of ending hunger, of the prospect of universal education, the transparency and accountability that is rising in the world to hold people accountable for their behavior. I am delighted to be part of right now is being able to live my life so that I can be very self-conscious about how can we move people from not peace to peace to barely peace, those in barely peace to basic peace, and basic peace to relative peace. And there are, with Blessed Unrest, as a book to just demonstrate one snapshot of how many organizations and people around the world are working for those things. This is not a new idea, and the basic things that are important for peace to exist are on the move and in evolution. So my story of now is that it's an awesome moment to be alive on the planet, and that the solutions that are available in so many of these areas have already been tested and found to be effective in different ways and can be molded in different communities and situations. But we don't really have to wait 3 or 4 generations to solve some problems like we did in the past, that we are in the moment of shift and transformation. I so love that the International Day of Peace exists already and is celebrated in countries around the world, and that we now have the ability to share with one another around the world what makes an effective International Day of Peace, such that people are inspired by where we've come from, where we are, and what people are doing to move their country forward, their people forward, their community forward, their family forward, so that we can be inspired by one another, that we can become well-informed. As someone who cares about peace, it's very important to be well-informed, but that we make it easy for people to be well-informed about who are the peace builders in their community and what are the most important peace events and trends happening in the world, so that Peace Day is a day of celebration in your community where people are inspired, they are informed, it makes them want to move into the next level of effective action, and that we're able, with Peace Day as the hub, to provide year-round support with all kinds of social media and all kinds of interconnectedness among people, to support people all year long in keeping that vision of what peace means for them uppermost in their mind, and making sure that they're truing themselves up to it on a daily basis. People who have been thoughtful about the creation of the International Day of Peace and the things that are important relative to the International Day of Peace is that it isn't about any one thing or any one people. It's recognizing that we can learn from indigenous cultures from around the world and throughout history that have lived in peace and have different kinds of philosophies and beliefs and practices that may or may not be so present right now. But we can shine the light on them, we can honor them, and we can bring them into our own lives. And they may need to be tweaked for modern times or whatever, but we have the ability to learn from one another, from people who may not have an Ivy League education, but they come from a deep thoughtful place in terms of their connectedness to the world and to history and to others. So I think that's part of what was so wonderful about the Olympic Village, because it was not about elitism. You had people who came from poverty and people who came from wealth. You have people who came from privilege, people who were well educated in the classical sense, people who were well educated in terms of, kind of common wisdom. Before I had the idea that I could be in the Olympics, I behaved in a certain way, which was hanging out with my friends and not training so hard when the coach wasn't looking. As soon as I got this crazy idea that I could be an Olympian, and I couldn't shake it from my head, everything came from that. Well, if I'm going to be an Olympian, how I ate, who I hung out with, what kind of job I had, how many units I took at school, I was coming from being an Olympian. And then I became one. I believe the same thing is true about peace. As opposed to something that I'm going to learn out there, it's about a place to come from. So I think that's why the respect and curiosity work for me.